Ukraine's defenders had beaten back the far larger Russian army for 62 days. Ukraine has now fought back against the Kremlin's aggression for 793 days. That's more than 2.5 times as long as the Battle of Verdun during the First World War. It's also more than 2.5 times as long as the Soviet Union's blockade of Berlin during the Cold War. Ukraine is still in the fight and still showing incredible skill, courage, and resilience. And this coalition is still standing strong. Over the past 2 years, this contact group has shown its unity, its impact, and its staying power. And we've made history, and we've changed history. This contact group includes some 50 members of our allies and partners from all around the planet. And we stand united in marshaling military assistance for Ukraine. And we've surged in critical capabilities again and again. And this contact group has made a huge difference. Contact group members have committed more than $95 billion in security assistance to Ukraine. And I'm very proud of America's leadership and contributions. And I'm glad that President Biden could sign into law additional life-saving assistance for Ukraine, as well as more funding for Israel, Taiwan, and our defense industrial base. And that will let the United States move out immediately to send Ukraine critical air defense capabilities and artillery and armor, and from our military stocks, as President Biden announced on Wednesday. I'm also pleased to announce today an additional commitment of $6 billion through our Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. That will allow us to procure new capabilities for Ukraine from U.S. industry. This is the largest security assistance package that we've committed to date. It will include critical interceptors for Ukraine's Patriot and NASAMS air defense systems, more counter-drone systems and support equipment, significant amounts of artillery ammunition and air-to-ground munitions, and maintenance and sustainment support. And so the announcements this week underscore America's enduring commitment to Ukraine's defense. I'm also proud of all the capabilities that our allies and partners have provided to Ukraine. Our contact group partners have contributed most of the counter-UAS systems provided to Ukraine, and most of the 155 millimeter artillery systems, most of the tanks, most of the armored personnel carriers, most of the infantry fighting vehicles, and more. And throughout Putin's war of choice, these contributions have been crucial, and they saved countless Ukrainian lives. So 2 years later, this contact group stands strong, and this coalition stands together. And we will not falter, we will not flinch, and we will not fail. Together, we'll continue to work on 2 tracks: rushing Ukraine the capabilities to meet its urgent battlefield needs, and helping Ukraine to build the future force to stave off and deter Russian aggression over the longer term. On that first track, we pushed especially hard today to rush in more air defense systems and interceptors. And on the second, this contact group is working with Ukraine to help it move toward a robust, efficient, and self-reliant defense industry. Now, much of this work is taking place in the contact group's new capability coalitions. These coalitions are looking for ways to further strengthen Ukraine's capabilities. And they're identifying where and how to boost Ukraine's capabilities in such areas as air defense, air power, artillery, maritime security, armor, information technology, demining, and UAVs. I'm grateful to all the countries heading up the 8 capability coalitions that are now up and running. Now, when this contact group first met at Ramstein, I said that Putin never imagined that the world would rally behind Ukraine so swiftly and surely. And I said that this coalition reflects a galvanized world. It still does. And the nations of goodwill that gather today understand what's at stake for Ukraine, for Europe, for the United States, and for the world. The outcome in Ukraine will determine the trajectory of our times. If Putin prevails in Ukraine, the security consequences will be grave and global. Europe would face a security threat that it hasn't seen in our lifetimes. As President Biden has noted, Russia will not stop in Ukraine. If the Kremlin gets its way, if Putin's war of imperial aggression succeeds, every tyrant on earth will take note. So we've got a rare chance to shape the kind of world that our children and grandchildren live in. Putin's war is a frontal assault on the very idea of an open world of rules, rights, and responsibilities. And over the long haul, the cost of standing firm would be dwarfed by the price of caving in. As we saw again today, that's clear to this extraordinary contact group and to our galvanized world. And with that, let me turn it over to General Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Good afternoon, everyone. In moments of challenge, history can reflect insights that inform the present. Shortly after the Korean War armistice, George Marshall accepted a Nobel Peace Prize for the Marshall Plan and said, "For the moment, the maintenance of peace in the present hazardous world situation does depend in a very large measure on military power together with allied cohesion." Marshall believed that military power was necessary but not sufficient. He continued, I believe there is, however, a readiness to cooperate, which is one of the great and hopeful factors of the world today. We must stand together strongly. These principles, military strength and international cooperation, are more important than ever and serve as a cornerstone of our commitment to uphold the sovereignty of nations such as Ukraine. The work of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group is firmly rooted in these principles. Once again, I want to thank Secretary Austin for your leadership in steering this international coalition, which has been meeting for 2 years. Thanks also to Defense Minister Umerov and General Sersky, who joined us today, for their resilient leadership of Ukraine's armed forces. And to all nations attending the UDCG today, their efforts remain invaluable to this coalition's work supporting Ukraine. Russia's war in Ukraine endangers the sovereignty of nations and the rule of law, reminding us that unchecked aggression against one nation threatens the sovereignty of all. As Marshall said, the role of military power, in this case a strong Ukraine, combined with support from a unified coalition, is crucial to responding to unprovoked hostility. Russia's ongoing aggression against Ukraine and Ukraine's fight for sovereignty is a matter of international significance, a direct challenge to global security and that of NATO and the United States. Ukrainian forces are facing severe challenges. Their operational tempo is hindered not by lack of will, but by dwindling supplies. Ukraine's soldiers continue fortifying defenses against significant odds, knowing that their armament cannot stop a resurgent Russian force without sustained military support to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russia is aggressively reconstituting its military force, using its numerical advantage to wear down Ukraine's resolve and resources. In the U.S. military, we often say hope is not an effective course of action. Yet, Ukraine has been left hoping for urgent replenishments of air defense, artillery, and armor. And that is why we all need to operate with a sense of urgency. The recently passed U.S. National Security Supplemental provides a vital lifeline to Ukraine at a critical junction in this conflict. And 2 days ago, the United States announced a very significant $1 billion security assistance package that will provide much-needed munitions and support to Ukraine. This package includes capabilities, weapon systems, and munitions that will help shore up Ukraine defenses and provide critical air defense munitions, protecting Ukrainian forces, critical national infrastructure, and population center, helping to counter Russia's plan of outlasting Ukraine. The leadership of the UDCG matters. It's absolutely critical. It drives action. Leaders don't stand on the sidelines. The support of Ukraine is not just for Ukraine. Our efforts to assist Ukraine sets an example. Should Russia win, the repercussions will be felt well outside Ukraine's borders, risking further escalation. The fight in Ukraine is not just a distant battle. It's about preventing a wider conflict that could potentially draw others deeper into prolonged armed engagements. What happens in one corner of the world doesn't stay in one corner of the world. This is what George Marshall knew. Peace and security are achieved through military readiness and collective effort. The efforts of this coalition help uphold an international order that benefits the population of all countries who seek freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you both, gentlemen. Our first question will go to Associated Press. Lita.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much. Mr. Secretary, President Zelensky this morning made it clear that his country needs Patriot systems, not just the munitions that go with it. Can you say how much, if any, progress you all made today on that, considering a number of allies have expressed reluctance in sending these systems that they just don't have very many of? And Mr. Chairman, if I could switch to a different topic for you. On Gaza, a lot of the aid agencies are very concerned about security in and around the port, particularly as things move ahead to distribution of aid. What assurances have you gotten from the Israelis about security at the port, including from their own troops who have had incidents and where they've killed aid workers? Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Well, thanks, Lita. In terms of Patriots and what we'll be able to do going forward, it's left to be seen, but I can tell you that we continue to work on this in a very earnest manner. All of the countries that have Patriots certainly value that capability. But I think going forward, we'll be able to hopefully work with a number of countries to put together additional Patriot capability. And you may have noticed that in the last several days, I've been talking one-on-one with some of my European counterparts, actually discussing this issue and other issues. But again, we're going to continue to work at this until we have the right kinds of capability. Now, I would point out that it's not just Patriot that they need other types of systems and interceptors as well. And so I would caution us all in terms of making Patriot the silver bullet. I would say that it's gonna be the integrated air and missile defense, as we said so many times before, that really turns the tide. And so there are other capabilities that they need that we really pushed hard to get, and we may be able to get to the Ukrainians a bit faster. But this work continues on, and you know that Jens Stoltenberg talked to all the ministers of defense on this very same issue a week ago. And in addition to the point-to-point work that I'm doing with my colleagues, we'll continue to emphasize that countries are going to have to. We're going to ask them to accept a little bit more risk so that we can do what's necessary in Ukraine. So.
I appreciate the question. One of the areas that we've been focused on as we move down the path of bringing our joint logistics over the shore and build the port on the beaches of Gaza there is not only the security of the port itself, the security of our forces, but also the security of the distribution and also the aid workers. And a couple things that we've done is engaged not only with our Israeli counterparts, but also with some of the aid agencies as well. And so as I've engaged with my counterpart, we've talked specifically about the security for the port area as well as the distribution. After the unfortunate incident that killed the Whittier workers from the World Central Kitchen, I talked to my Israeli counterpart about the incident itself, the investigation they did, and the corrective actions they were putting in place. And that was been part of the discussion between, as United States Central Command leadership has been engaging with the various agencies that will help with the distribution, to provide them the confidence that we've worked closely with the Israelis to provide for their protection and ensure that they have the procedures in place so you don't have an incident that very similar to what occurred previously.
Mr. Secretary, some critics say the U.S. strategy in Ukraine has been to give Ukraine enough assistance not to lose, but not enough to win, for fear of provoking Russia, because Russia is a nuclear power. Will there be any restrictions on the new weapons that are being sent, the ATACMS and others, where they can be used, where they cannot be used? And what would you say to Republicans who voted against aid to Ukraine, who say that you don't have a strategy? What is your strategy?
Thanks, Jen. We said from the very beginning, you heard the president say that our goal is to see a democratic, independent, and sovereign Ukraine that has the capability to defend itself and deter aggression going forward. And so you see us working towards that end with not only the capability that we're providing Ukraine in the current battle, but the kinds of things that we're building, helping Ukraine build for the future, pointing back to the capability coalitions. So in terms of what Ukraine needs on a day-to-day basis, as you know, I talk to Minister Umerov every week, and we talk about what his requirements are, what's most needed, what's most critical, and when in days gone by, when others were talking about different types of systems, we were focused on providing Ukraine adequate air defense capabilities. And we've seen how important that was over time, and it will continue to be important going forward. And without that focus, without that kind of capability, Ukraine would be in much worse shape because of the capability that's resident in the Russian air forces. So I would caution anyone in saying that, in believing that one type of system is going to be a silver bullet. It's going to be a combination of a number of systems. It's going to be dependent upon whether or not Ukraine can effectively employ these systems and sustain those systems, and whether or not Ukraine can mobilize an adequate number of troops to replenish its ranks. And so we continue to work on all those things simultaneously. And we really want Ukraine to be successful. We've invested a lot. This is really important, not just for Ukraine, but for the world, and for all the reasons that you heard me talk about in my opener. So.
General Brown, can Ukraine win?
Well, the key part here is to make sure Ukraine can defend itself. And as the Secretary highlighted, and I've talked about here recently, is that unchecked aggression leads to more aggression. And so this is why it is so important for us to put Ukraine in a place so it can defend itself, and that we don't have this broaden to a much wider conflict. And when I think about how World War II started, or previous world wars, this is why this is so important that we have Ukraine Defense Contact Group and all the nations around the world that are focused on ensuring Ukraine is successful.
And Ukraine can be successful if it has the right amount of security assistance. So we are all very grateful for Congress passing the supplemental. And again, if you think about what Russia intended to do early on, what its strategic objectives were, and the fact that it failed to achieve any strategic objectives, and 2 years later, 793 days later, Ukraine is still fighting. It's still holding its ground. And that's quite remarkable. And it's holding that ground even in the face of a question as to whether or not we were going to continue to support them. That question is off the table now. And that has reassured the Ukrainians, but also has reassured our allies and partners around the globe as well. So.
Let's go to Washington Post. Pamela.
Mr. Secretary, thanks for your time today. National Security Advisor Sullivan raised the concern this week about there being a catch-up period in terms of getting interceptors and some of this new aid to Ukraine. Can you speak to, I guess, the vulnerabilities, the concerns that we're in this particularly sensitive time? And then, Mr. Chairman, there's reporting out this week suggesting that Ukraine has had to pull the Abrams tanks that the United States sent, in part due to concerns about the FPV drone threat. Can you confirm if that's true and put it into, I guess, a larger context of what it means in the battlefield?
Thanks for the question. I would say that the commitment that the United States has made is material. It's real. It's substantial. And we're going to do everything we can to get that security assistance to the Ukrainians as quickly as possible. You heard General Ryder mention a couple of days ago that we had done some things to pre-position stocks in Europe so that we could buy down the amount of time that it took to get certain types of things into the hands of the Ukraine. But even with that, this is not instantaneous. It's going to take some time to get things into the country, and then, most importantly, distributed to the point of need. But if you consider the fact that even without that, the Ukrainians were able to hold their own for a period of time, with this capability, we expect that they'll be able to do a lot better. And as I may have indicated earlier, they are doing some additional things to mobilize additional troops to replenish their ranks. And I think all those things are going to come together to to put them in a much better place. But it will take a little time. As I talk to Ukrainian leadership, they're confident that they can continue to hold their own, and then as they get a bit stronger, they'll have options available to them.
Dan, I appreciate the question. I'll defer to the Ukrainians on how they use their Abrams. But I will highlight the use of first-person view drones by both sides and the innovation that has occurred in this conflict with that capability. And there's something that I think we can all learn from how we're able to adapt in conflict, and that the character war using various weapon systems through innovation. And this is why, as an Air Force Chief of Staff and as a chairman, I've been very focused about how we bring innovation and how we move much more quickly to ensure we can adapt any type of battlefield environment. And you're watching that happen in the battle there in Ukraine.
Let's go to Tony Bloomberg.
A couple questions. One on the $6 billion USIA commitment. Can you flesh that out a little bit? What types of systems are you talking about? And we're talking about years now, not signed contracts going out today. Is that accurate? And for the chairman, a reality check on the package that went out the other day, what will it roughly allow Ukraine to do? Will it allow them to start a mini offensive, or is it more to become more on parity with the Russians now in terms of 155s, cluster munitions that you're sending, more defense versus offense?
Thanks, Tony. In terms of how long it will take to deliver the capability that we're investing in with the USAI funds, it depends. It depends on the type of system. As you know, some of the platforms have a much longer lead time to construct, and as well as some of the munitions. So it depends. You can rest assured that we're going to move as fast as we can to get them the capability, as fast as industry can produce, but we will move at the speed of industry. And we're investing in industry as well so that they can expand their capacity. And some of what's in that supplemental allows us to do that. The types of things that we're investing in are the same types of things that you heard us talk about earlier. They need air defense interceptors. They need artillery systems and munitions. They need armored vehicles. They need maintenance and sustainment. So all of those kinds of things are included in that USAI package.
And Tony, what this package allows gives the Ukrainians is a bit more flexibility. As you might imagine, not knowing when this supplemental, we very much appreciate that the supplemental was approved. They've had to actually ration and conserve munitions over time. And so with this package and the follow-on package, because the supplemental gives them a bit more flexibility to be able to operate and use that capability effectively against the Russian threat.
Okay, let's go to VOA and then I'll monitor.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. What made you change your mind on providing long-range ATACMS? Will they be included in the $1 billion package that was announced earlier this week? And since you talked about this will take time, has any of the aid from the $1 billion package actually reached Ukraine at this point? And then, Mr. Chairman, analysts are cautioning us that it will take a lot of time before we'll see the effects of this current aid on the battlefield. When do you think that Ukrainians will have the opportunity to again have the upper hand?
In terms of the provision of ATACMS, as you know, we have provided the Ukrainians ATACMS before. They come in various types with different ranges. And of course, there are mixtures of munitions here going forward. And I won't get specific in terms of what we provided and whether or not, and when the Ukrainians will actually put those munitions to use. But the key point is they have the capability. Now, that capability alone is not a silver bullet. It's the integration of that capability with the other kinds of things like Storm Shadow and other things that other countries are providing that really then gives them a capability to conduct a long-range fires campaign. And so I think that's what's most important. But in terms of specifics of, how many and where, I'll let the Ukrainians speak to that.
If I may follow, officials had expressed before concerns that that the Ukraine may try to fire ATACMS into Russia, or that there weren't enough in U.S. stockpiles. Did either of those affect your decision to provide the long-range ATACMS?
Well, first of all,